Hey, hello everyone. Again, it's Percy King, King Speak. And as you guys know, I'm an attorney, MBA, spend time in medicine. Today, this one is going to be a little different. It's going to be good news for some people, bad news for some people, terrible news for some people, and pretty damn devastating for others. Now, this one, I'm going to go a little bit more into depth as to the situation with the current president, President Trump, and why he's doing all these things that people say that he can't do, all these things that even the Supreme Court in some instances say that he cannot do, and then why nothing is happening and nobody's doing anything to stop him from doing all these things that he supposedly cannot do. All right. Now, before I previously explained that, it's because it's the first time that we have somebody who doesn't really care about what you think, and that he doesn't care as much about the party because, he never really was a Republican before, but he goes way, way beyond that. And in talking about this, first thing that kind of have to get you to understand is why we're really in this situation and why this individual, being President Trump, who so many people call, stupid, isn't. You don't have to believe that he's brilliant and that, he knows about this, he, did good in school or anything like that. Think of it more like when you have someone who is just good at doing something and you just have to admit that they're good at doing that thing, whether it be a criminal good at something, a man or woman good at fooling the opposite sex. He understood that he needed help with some of these things, and they put together a great plan, and this was a setup beyond belief. It's pretty brilliant, and it took place over a period of probably about 12 years. It started off with, him, getting people behind him with, him talking about Obama. Then he was able to get himself to the point where he was elected president. And there was a bunch of things set up during his presidency. Okay. One thing that you need to do if you're going to do the things that he's been doing is you need to have the Supreme Court not necessarily behind you, but not really standing in front of you. And by that, I mean you need to have appointed people who you believe are going to decide in your favor, or at least not necessarily decide against you. Okay. And you also need to have the House and the Senate as well. And he has that. So what people don't understand is that even when the Supreme Court tries to step in and say that something is illegal, there still has to be a mechanism in place to enforce the rulings that the Supreme Court, puts out. Now, what happened is that because that Supreme Court was beyond leaning conservative, you had a Supreme Court, or you have a Supreme Court who made decisions before he got into office that basically helped facilitate all these different things. We talked about the case where they explained the presidential powers and, the immunity that, a president has, and also the power to pardon. All that came out before he got into office. Okay. And then since then, we have the recent case, which basically explains that now these injunctions are not going to be anything beyond the named parties. They initially only went after being localized injunction, and it got narrowed even further than that. So now, unless you have money, all these so-called illegal acts, while they may be eventually declared illegal, he can do them until somebody steps in to do something about it. Now, what people have to understand is that what is the mechanism that actually stops a president or somebody from doing something illegal? Supreme Court comes out with a ruling, or the federal court comes out with a ruling. Who is the law enforcement? The law enforcement officer, the top one, is the Attorney General. And beyond that, you have all of the federal agencies, from the FBI, CIA, HSI, ATF, all those different agencies. But what you have to understand is that who names the head of all those? The president. And who determines whether or not they want their resignation? The president. So if you come at the president, he could say, well, I don't really like you coming after me, so I'm going to need that resignation on my desk today, or in a couple of minutes, or I'm going to fire you. Before, presidents wouldn't do that because, the way it looked. But if you have somebody who doesn't really give a damn about the way it looks, and they want to make sure they can continue to do what they want to do, then the law enforcement officer is the very person who needs enforcement to be held against them. So what does that mean? That means that notwithstanding what order comes out from the Supreme Court, he can stop the enforcement of it by just saying, if you're going to do that, you know you're fired, right? Or fire you before you actually can do that. So when people say, well, he doesn't seem to be afraid. No. And when the Supreme Court said that, they had illegally deported somebody and they need to get that person back from the country, he just said, oh, well, we can't do it. And even invited, one of their leaders over to say, yeah, hey, it's just not going to happen. And they laughed about it. They can laugh about it because who's going to do anything about anything? Do you really expect them to allow himself to be harmed? That would be stupid. Then he would be stupid like, people think that he is. But he keeps proving that he's not stupid. I mean, this is an ultimate setup. Put people in place, created, agencies, got rid of agencies, and now they're going through and getting rid of people who stand in their place, shutting down agencies that would harm him and or his business interests or his friends, getting rid of some of the best, so therefore who's left will not be the ones who know the most or could do the most or harm him. A lot of the prosecutors are either quitting or being terminated. So what you have is a full-on press to make sure that whatever he wants to do are things that he can do. So that's not something that, somebody who is, stupid would actually do. So now, one of the things that, for a little bit, I initially thought that he just didn't care anything about the party. And while that may necessarily be true, his people at least understand that he won't be able to get their support and the support that he needs from those in the legislature in order to get the things done unless they're getting something out of it. All right. Or not just getting something out of it, or at least being able to maintain their positions while getting something out of it, or not getting something out of it for themselves, or at least having a perception of they're getting something out of it for the people. All right. So, here's how that comes into play. And, there have been, a lot of people standing by and seeing people who hadn't previously been affected by the things that he's done be affected, whether it be the Cubans who, did the song I Will Vote for Donald Trump, or, other Latinos or people of other races. And, there's been, folks that look like me, have been sitting back just kind of laughing at him, saying, hey, you finally, got, hit by it. But here's the thing about that. A lot of people just believe that they're just going to, have this harm just like we've had or other people have had, and it's going to be long term. No, that harm is going to be short term. All right. Whereas the things that are going on going to be long term for black folks and LGBTQ and all those other different people groups. The harm that has happened to, some European Americans won't last as long, whether they be poor, middle class, or whatever. What you need to understand is the different groups that are within the Republican Party and why Republicans even win elections when they have candidates that most of you believe are unsavory, unqualified, or whatever. There's a book about it, and, this Republicans keep winning, all right? There's a reason why that keeps happening. Go into a few things, and those things are going to basically explain why even folks within the party who are being harmed now are going to stay behind them, because at some point in time, this message as to what they're getting out of it is going to come out. All right. So what you have to understand is some of the background. Some of the background is that, you looked at some of the reasons why certain things haven't happened, like universal health care, and, certain people have been against certain entitlements or food stamps and other things of that sort. And they'll tell you that polls have said that, and studies have said that they voted against it because black folks were going to get it too. For some people it's true, some people it's not true, but there are a group of people who are against things because minorities got them as well. So Republicans cater to the people who are in their party, but they only cater to them to the extent that they want the same things that the party wants. They don't do like the Democratic Party and keep bringing people in and then splintering and having all these different people that they're going to need to satisfy. They give the same few things. They want you to be religious. They want to be, against sexual deviance. They're against abortion. They're want to be perceived as being against big government, unless they're the ones being the big government because they believe that they can actually take on the things and do what's right. That's the only reason the big government actually should exist, and then they'll dwindle it down after they actually do what they need to do. So they'll give those things, but they message how those things are coming out differently to the different groups that are in the party. And that's why when they're talking about, oh, you have all these, races that, are Republicans, this, that, and the other, races in both parties. Okay. But as far as the Republicans who may be biased or racist or whatever, the message to them has always been different. And, in explaining how this is going to help them, here's how I necessarily explain it. It took more than 50 years for, black people to get certain rights, for certain laws to be passed, for, certain advances to be made. And this was all in the face of these things that a lot of people claim that didn't exist. However, a lot of those claims they came about because they did not want to admit that certain advantages occurred, which would then decrease their ability to see themselves as actually doing these things themselves. So whether you believe these things existed or not, let me go through a listing of the advantages that came from institutionalized racism. Legal and criminal justice system advantages: presumption of innocence, lower sentencing rates, less police surveillance. Now this is advantages for whites. Greater likelihood of diversion programs, generational wealth through home ownership, because they had access to loans, and we know about redlining, access to better neighborhoods and schools, higher property appraisals. The access to better schools is because the neighborhood's worth more, there's more taxation on your home, so therefore you have more money for schools. Inheritance and asset transfers, better funded public schools, more inclusive curricula, bias in discipline, affirmative assumptions, meaning that you were looked at as being intelligent from the start, whereas people of other races may not have been. Employment and economic opportunities, name and appearance bias, greater likelihood of hiring and promotions, more access to capital, higher average pay in healthcare, better quality care, more access to providers, longer life expectancy, social perception and psychological safety, cultural normativity, speech, appearance, dress are viewed as more of the norm and the standard, freedom from stereotyping, media representation, freedom from ethnic profiling, institutional access, policy and leadership dominance, laws, policies, institutions. Of course, you see many more white folks, even percentage-wise, based upon the percentage within the group. Greater political power, fewer administrative burdens, easier loan approval, higher credit scores, lower insurance premiums. There's so many different things that people saw, viewed as unearned advantages. And, if you were on the other side, you viewed them as norms based upon, who we are and us working harder and whatever it might be. Now, what had been happening is that the reason why we had a lot of the court cases where, with affirmative action saying that, you're getting into college and I should be able to go to that college because I had a higher score, whatever. And what a lot of black folks viewed it as is that, white folks saying, well, we just should keep having everything. We know we had the advantages. We know that slavery happened. We know all these different things, but we still earn the right because we did better. And not wanting to admit to any of those things, the bias in the way the tests were done, bias in the way things were, handed out. All those things, none of that was in their mind as being something that caused any of this stuff. So whichever way you wanted to see it, those things happened, and they saw that being eaten away with all the new laws coming through. You saw more black folks as judges. You saw minorities as getting money. You saw a lot more minorities being wealthy, a lot more getting into movies, entertainment, or what have you. And they saw those advantages that, no matter what you want to say, came out of, slavery and, the passage of, income and wealth based upon the way things were set up, and a lot of the institutional things that, were in place, biases, whatever. You saw that getting less and less. So even though it took more than 50 years to gain some of those advantages, in 5 months, they were erased. So when you look at it, you look at this when it comes to, minorities and black people specifically gaining things in American society as a weight loss journey. And the weight loss journey was basically getting rid of some of the barriers. It was equivalent to diet and exercise, and it took all this time to lose that 15 pounds that you wanted to lose. Even though you want to lose more, you really need to lose 70 pounds. But you lost 15 and was able to fit in clothes you hadn't fit in a while. And it took you 50 years to do that. And in 5 months, they came back and basically wiped all that out. And now you're at the point, for many people, a point from before they were even alive. Okay, so now you're at a point from well before you were even alive. Now we're getting to the point where I'm going to explain to you where some of these folks who are being harmed, what they're going to be receiving. A lot of those things that they were losing, a lot of the lower income, the poor whites in the Republican Party, what they're going to see now is that the three things that most people want most, and the three things that book, Republican Keep Winning, explained, that Republicans understand, is that people want to be perceived as being good people. Don't actually have to be good people. You just have to be perceived as that, and you can make yourself believe that based upon your thinking about all these different things that I'm explaining to you. Whereas one side views it this way, the other side views it that way. To be perceived as being intelligent, and to be perceived as having some type of wealth. It does not necessarily mean that you are rich. It just means that you're not perceived as being poor or in the same way as somebody beneath you. And all of this basically is about the currency, the most important currency to many people, which is your sense of self. All those things go into making your sense of self. And for hundreds of years in the United States, it allowed one group of people to look down upon an entire group of people, billions of people, not just the millions within the United States, but billions of people of color, and see themselves as being better, and they didn't have to do anything. So now these are going to be actual advantages coming from this. So basically what they can do is they can tell these folks that, well, you know what, you're going to lose some stuff, in the short haul. But then in the long run, you're going to have some of those important things that you find to be important. And one of them is that you are still much better off than those people. And now, not only are you more better off, we're going to be able to show you that you're better off. Because in cutting so many of these things and wiping out so much of the history of black folks and minorities and even women, what they've done is that many of those things that basically explained were the advantages that some whites actually received based upon, system of bias and racism. Those things, it'll be easier to dish those things out. It'll be more of those things. It's going to go back to the way it was in the 40s and the 50s, where it's much easier to show preference, shall we say. And even with AI coming and robots and stuff coming to change the nature of employment, there still will need to be supervisors. Who do you believe the supervisors are going to be? Houses still need to be built. Who do you believe are going to be the business owners? You're still going to need to get loans. Who will have a preference for loans? Okay. Now, whether it's a wink wink or they just really understand this, it's an unspoken understanding, it's fact. When you look at the data, that's what's going to happen. They're going to, in the short haul, be harmed, but part of the Republican way is the understanding that at some point in time, you may be the one that has to take one for the team, but you will be rewarded. That is something that has been around with them for many years, and it works. It really does work. And if you don't think it works, all you have to do is look back and see how people have been rewarded for doing certain things. And even if they went to jail, afterwards they came out, and then you look up and they're on the speaking circuit, and they're making all this money, and then all of a sudden they work for a company, and now they kind of disappeared, but their life is better than it was before. They took one for the team, okay? But for black folks and minorities, no, it's going to be long term. The things that they changed, there's so much that they've changed that You're not going to be able to get this stuff back to where it was because they're going to fight it. It's only, as far as they're concerned, it's only smart for them to fight it. Why allow this to go exactly back the way it was when they went through all this heck, to plan this out and get this done the way that they've gotten it done? So that, you're looking at why, they're protesting now, but they're not doing anything about it. They're just protesting. And after a while, those will stop. That's going to stop because they're going to see where, yeah, it's not going to last forever for us, but it will, last for a long time for them. And also, what you have to understand is this one of the things that I've always thought about, and it's something that many black folks and minorities and even women, when it comes to certain things, don't necessarily think about. When you are asking for somebody, let's just say specifically the white male, to be your ally, okay, and help you to get certain rights, what you are doing is asking him to likely do something that objectively can be viewed against their own best interest. Now, let me explain that. So back in the 50s and even now, they have an advantage, okay? There's more of them. They're able to pass wealth easier. There's an advantage for the kids not having to worry about their name, not having to worry about, the police dealing with them in a certain way. All these things are known. They're facts, no matter what you want to believe about it. There are studies done about it. The statistics show it. You are asking them to give up an advantage for their kids, for their grandchildren, their own personal advantage. You're asking them to willingly want to compete. You're asking them to give up the ability to get a loan easier because now it's going to come to you, instead, because they need to kind of spread this stuff out. You're asking them to, give up certain things that they didn't actually have anything, they didn't do anything to receive, but others did. Their ancestors, their family, their friends, they did all these different things to make sure that they had these advantages, and now you're asking them to give them up, okay? So when you look at it that way, you're like, oh, well, no, but you're a good person, if you give that up. You still don't understand. I just explained to you that people just want to be perceived as being something. And how you're perceived as being something directly is reflected in how you choose to view the things that make you a good person, or what makes you a good person. Does it make you a good person that you want everybody to have, or does it make you a good person that you want to make sure that your family has? You have to look at that. So now when people say that he doesn't necessarily care about the party, it's difficult to really say that that's actually, the truth. It may be, but they're still doing things to make sure that even the least in the party will eventually get something out of it that they want. Because those are things that they want. They want that advantage. Why would you not want that advantage? So what you have is a plan that has been put into place that works. My God, when you look at it, I don't want people to think that I'm looking at him like, oh my God, he is, envious of this plan. No, I mean, it's like such a setup that you have to, sometimes you have to look back at something and say, damn, they did a great job of screwing us. They really did. I mean, because they made it so that even people who hated him have had to kiss the ring. Even people who were lawyers against him have had to bow down. And there's business owners who think nothing of him, are hiding, hoping that they too don't have to end up kissing his butt too. Because you can see there's folks that hated him, and now they're sitting in the meeting and they are cowering. They are sitting there, oh yeah, Mr. Trump, oh yeah, Mr. President. I mean, the amount of people, the amount of men who said terrible things about him, who he has now made his bitch, is ridiculous. So sometimes you have to admit things. And my biggest takeaway for people here, whether you are a Democrat or a Republican, is you have to understand what this means for us going forward. What it means for us going forward is that for black folks and other minorities, oh man, it's going to be a long, long road. And for many people, depending on how old you are, this is going to be permanent change for you, because it won't be changed, it won't be fixed or even come close to being back where it was before he got in office the first time in your lifetime. It won't get back to that. There's just too much. There's too much to do. There's too many changes that have been made. So for a lot of folks, it's going to be one of those things where it's, okay, what people need to do is they need to really think and understand that there are different ways of viewing things. And if you are going to actually come up with a plan to change things or to combat something, you need to combat people where they are. Meaning that you have to come up with a plan that deals with all the different groups that you're going against, instead of trying to come up with a plan that attacks things the way that you view things. Instead of coming up with a plan thinking that, oh my God, these people are so stupid, but you have all these so-called stupid people who have done all these terrible or these things that are detrimental to you that will change your life. And it was damn easy work for them. They did it in record time. It was easy work because you weren't willing to do certain things. You had Obama wasn't willing to put somebody on the Supreme Court, waited the entire year of his last presidency and didn't do anything about it. Whereas within the last month and a half, Trump was willing to put somebody in the Supreme Court. It just, for people to not really understand why things are happening. That's what this entire book was about. This entire book, we're unwilling to view people in the light that makes it so that you can't win. That it makes it so that if people are this way, then this is going to be bad for me. No. You have to stop viewing people as the default that people are good people. No. The default is that people want to be perceived as good people, but for the most part, the default is that people aren't necessarily good people. All right? Because it isn't important for them to actually be good people. It's more important for them to be viewed as something and not do the work to be that thing. So if you actually view people in that way, it'll be much easier for you to get through life. It'll be much easier for you to understand why these things are happening, how easy it was for these things to happen, because you made it easy. Because why? Most of you are not going to do a damn thing but shake your fist. A lot of you didn't even vote. A lot of you had friends that you knew were thinking about things in the wrong way, and you didn't do anything about it. So now, here we are. Always, I need you to share this, comment, like it, subscribe. There's an awful lot more coming. I don't just have views. I for the most part, because I did spend time clerking for a senior federal judge, I view things neutrally. I view things objectively. And I view things in the way that others view them, so I can relay it to you so that you can understand. But until next time, take care of yourself, and I look forward to seeing you.